following program has been pre-recorded, so please hold your calls.
Welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness with your host, Janelle Elgaway.
Good evening. Welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness. I'm your host, Janelle Elgaway. If you have a question, please call in at 415-915-2291. I found out today Dr. Forrest Tennant office was raided by the DEA. A little background on Dr. Tennant. He is an internist and addictionologist who specializes in the research and treatment of intractable pain at VRAC Intractable Pain Clinics in West Covina, California. Dr. Tennant started his pain clinic in 1975, originally focused on treating the pain of cancer and post-polio disease. He has authored over 300 scientific articles and books. Dr. Tennant is a member of the American Academy of Pain Medicine, the Academy of Integrative Pain Management, the American Pain Society, and the American Society of Addiction Medicine. He formerly served as a medical officer in the U.S. Army and U.S. Public Health Service, and was a consultant on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, National Institute on Drug Abuse, Drug Enforcement Agency, LA Dodgers, NFL League, and NASCAR. And he also is editor-in-chief of Practical Pain Management Journal. Tonight, we are having a special show because of what happened with Dr. Tennant, and also so we can all learn a little bit more about, what is going on within the United States concerning opioids. Our two guests tonight are Dr. Thomas Kline and Andrea Anderson. How are you both tonight?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great. Can you please tell me a little bit about your professional background? We'll start with Dr. Kline.
I've been practicing for 40 years. I practice primary care medicine, but for a limited population of people with long-term illness. So I'm still a primary care doctor, but a specialist at the same time.
And what about you, Andrea?
My professional background is as a consultant to medical and legal firms regarding personal injury due to car accidents or work-related accidents or medical malpractice. I do record review and inform attorneys regarding laws that are applicable in each case.
So today, many of us found out that Dr. Tennant's office was raided by the DEA. Andrea, would you please tell us what happened and why his office was raided?
Yes, it is a great grief to the entire community of people who love and respect Dr. Tennant for the work that he's dedicated his life to. Today, in a 78-page search warrant, the DEA raided Dr. Tennant's offices, confiscated all of his patient records, his appointment books, and all his financial documents. In this warrant, they alleged that Dr. Tennant prescribed such high doses of opioid pain medications that his patients could not possibly survive, and therefore they must be selling their medications. They also alleged that Dr. Tennant took financial kickbacks from a pharmaceutical company, all of which are things that related to events several years past when Dr. Tennant was a speaker back in 2015. He had already disclosed a long time ago that he had received certain amounts of money from the company, which was invested in his clinic, which he runs with his wife.
Dr. Kline, was there anything else that Andrea didn't mention, or was that just the gist?
She covered it real well, but just as an aside, Dr. Forrest Tennant has a page in Wikipedia if anybody wants to read up on him.
Oh.
One thing I would like to mention, if you don't mind, he has no financial relationships. He considers his clinic a charity. He says that he's pretty unfamiliar with the people to whom he was associated. In the search warrant, it alleges that the DEA has been investigating him since 2015 and tangentially targets a drug trafficking organization involving a pharmaceutical company and then multiple prescriptions who are filled through this particular pharmacy. For some reason, they're focusing on Dr. Tennant. But he says he's unfamiliar with the named parties in the suit and has no financial relationships with them.
Is this a normal
The odd thing that go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is this
the odd thing that the DEA can close your practice down and not file any charges against you? It's kind of like the TV shows, charge me or let me go. Not charging somebody is pretty serious, breach of legal procedure in my view.
Well, what is that?
It's one of the... Yeah, on the legal side of this, unfortunately, as part of receiving a DEA license, physicians grant them access to their medical records of their clients and their financial records. So technically, unlike any other type of seizure or raid where you would need to find a warrant that was based on credible evidence that something was, being done improperly, the DEA doesn't have any there's no burden on them to receive a warrant and prove probable cause before they raid an office. They are allowed to go in, raid the office, essentially shut it down for could be years while they go through records, destroying the livelihood of our physicians, and then eventually come out and say, well, there's no charges. Dr. Tennant has not been charged with a crime at all. So this is raid first, figure it out later, which is a standard that nobody else in the United States is subjected to, except for our DEA licensed physicians.
So is this a normal thing amongst doctors in today's age? Dr. Kline, would you like to answer that?
The DEA, along with Medicare administration or any other federal agency that does business with me or I do business with them, has the prerogative to come in and look at my records. That's fine. But when Medicare wants to look at my records, they send me a letter. They don't come in with SWAT teams and multiple vehicles with lights flashing, multiple agents, usually the local police. And they come with administrative warrants, which are not signed and are not under probable cause. And they cannot actually enter your premises without permission. The other interesting thing is the medical records belong to the individual. I see patients and I write their charts. It belongs to the patient. I am
That's exactly right.
called the keeper. I'm the keeper of the records. So is the question is, when you haul off private property that belongs to patients, one, they don't really can't get medical care, and number two, if the DEA or Medicare administration or anyone else wants to see records, they always ask for copies. And that protects the patient record.
Right.
So I make copies. What the DEA is afraid of is the doctors will run around in the middle of the night, change all the records. So they just take them all, kind of like when they took all the records from Enron, or the FBI takes records from crooked companies in New York that have nothing to do with medicine. But this is the practice of medicine. This is a different thing.
Right. And the DEA, you're absolutely right about that. In case anybody doesn't know, your patient records belong to you as the patient. In this case, they actually haven't said that Dr. Tennant can't operate his clinic, but effectively they have kneecapped him by removing all of his patient charts. Any of his patients can contact the DEA, and they will return each individual's records to them directly. And Dr. Tennant is asking all of his patients to do that, to contact the DEA, get their medical records and bring them back so he can continue treating them. Even in the face of all this, Dr. Tennant is not going to stop caring for the people that he believes are the most vulnerable in our society, and he's not going to be stopped. But he does need his patients to get their records and bring them back.
Has something this big ever happened to any doctor in the United States? Or is this like a normal thing? Or is this like rare?
No, it's not rare. The DEA's job is to save the nation from dope fiends, and that's how they see it. The DEA was formed in 1970 by Richard Nixon, who, according to John Ehrlichman in 1994, 25 years later, who confessed that Richard Nixon was only after political enemies, and this gave him an excuse. For hippies and left-wingers, it was marijuana. For black folks, it was cocaine. So if a group of people were holding a meeting, you could bust in and claim they were smoking marijuana or using cocaine, and you could arrest them on other charges. The DEA was also given a lot of extraordinary police procedures. I had a lunch once with a federal police officer who kind of confessed to me that the DEA really is out of control. And if they were to behave like the FBI properly, then there wouldn't be as many problems. But there's a federal position that doctors have caused the opioid epidemic that's been going on for 100 years. But the new GOAT is doctors, and there's no real proof for that. Of course, doctors trying to defend themselves always kind of sound like, oh, yeah, right, you're not guilty. But we're actually not guilty, and there's a lot of data to show that we're not guilty. But it's the federal stance and to go after doctors, and that's just what the FDA is doing. I'm sorry, the DEA.
Right. If I may just add,
Sure.
There's another trial that just rested today of our Montana doctor, Chris Christensen, who has been in an almost a month-long trial over the same types of charges that Dr. Tennant faces at the moment. Originally, the deputy county attorney filed 440 felony counts against Dr. Christensen for every prescription that he wrote to, I think it was 16 patients. Which is an unbelievable assertion. As the trial approached, they knocked it down to 22 counts. But Dr. Christensen has been without his records, his livelihood, for years now. And today it went to jury, and we're all looking forward to his exoneration over charges of somehow creating addicts or treating them without proper care. As there's no evidence for it.
Are they cleared, doctors, often, or no?
I'm sorry?
The cases I know of, there was a doctor in the Midwest that some of his patients went out and died, and they had prescriptions for pain medicine. It's not real clear if they died from that, but they had blood tests, and so they accused him of murder. He got, it was manslaughter. They charged him with 3 counts of manslaughter. It took 3 years, as the case that Andrea was mentioning up in Montana. And by 3 years, without your practice, the fellow in Montana had to declare bankruptcy. And the doctor in, I think it was Iowa, was finally let off by the jury. They said, this is crazy. Go home. It was too late. See, the trials drag on for years, and I don't know why, but they always drag on for years. It seems like 3 years is the magic number, and that will bring most all doctors to their knees.
Would bring most anybody to their knees. I don't know too many people who can go 3 years without their profession, especially when you've trained for as many years as our physicians do. To take 3 years out of your practice is almost unsustainable. I'd like to just mention one particular charge that Dr. Christensen has faced, where he was charged with 2 counts of negligent homicide. In that particular instance, the patient at issue had one pain medication that Dr. Christensen had prescribed. He had also somehow gotten another prescription from another doctor, and that evening took one of Dr. Christensen's prescribed medications and one from the other physician with a great deal of alcohol, and died that night. I don't know of what the actual cause, but that's one of the charges that Dr. Christensen is being charged for, negligent homicide in. And I understand that people who overdose or who, families that lose members this way are in great pain. And I understand the sympathy and the grief that they must experience. But I have to question how we can hold a physician responsible for the actions of people when they're not in their presence. It seems inconceivable to me that we're holding our doctors to that standard.
Dr. Kline, I want to know how you feel personally. Why do you continue to treat patients for their pain when you see all this in the news? Are you afraid? And what's your thoughts on this?
All physicians in the country are afraid, according to some little polls that we've done on Twitter, which are fairly accurate, I think. I asked patients how many of their doctors have stopped prescribing pain medicines in the last year.
A lot.
Half. Half of the doctors have quit prescribing pain medicines because they don't want their practices jerked out from under them one day by a DEA raid. Yeah.
Right, and many of the ones that are left have cut their patients down to such small amounts so that one of the ways the DEA operates is they do what's called a data point analysis, where they'll take a physician's prescribing habits and put it into a data points cluster. And where every doctor wants to be is in the middle of the cluster, for the safest place. Nobody wants to be the outlier in terms of the number of prescriptions that they wrote or the number of milligrams that averaged in their prescription. So in order to stay safe, many of the physicians who are still willing to treat pain patients have brought their doses down to extraordinarily low and ineffective amounts in order to just stay within the crowd and not be targeted for their prescribing habits.
Well, and they're basically using the CDC guidelines, not rules, guidelines, as the rules. Is that correct?
That is correct, but they are also a federal police force.
Okay.
And a federal police force doesn't really have the option of setting medical standards.
They actually refuse to do so. Yeah, they have refused when asked.
But they're operating off of it. They're scanning doctors. But remember, this all goes back to the assumption that writing too many prescriptions has caused an opioid epidemic or crisis, and it is not true.
Are there the same amount of addicts today as there were before this whole crisis thing came out? Do they even know? Interestingly,
yeah. If you there's 1 million people in the United States on heroin. Sounds like an awful lot, but if you divide it by the population of 320 million, you come up with 3 people per 1,000 with real addiction, and that's a large number, but it's a small percentage. In 1920, there were 220,000 addicts divided by the population in 1920, and it came out to 3 per 1,000. We have the exact same number of addicts today that we had in 1920, and that's sort of odd considering how much overwriting of prescriptions we're doing. You would think there would be a lot more, but there isn't.
Hasn't that been backed up by? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's only one explanation of why the number of addicts is the same as it was in 1920 and also in 1950, 1970, 1986, also the same as in Portugal, Canada, and the UK. They all have the same addiction rate. There's only one explanation, and it has to be genetic, or it has to be somehow limited, because we prescribe twice amount of pain medicine as they do in the UK, according to the studies, but the addiction rate is exactly the same. So the big confusion is, and when you read in the paper of all these overdose deaths, nobody, including the CDC, has said the actual number of addicted people has increased. But that's what spreads the fear. The fear is not people dying in the streets. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, too bad, their fault.
Right.
But it gets translated into, oh, this must mean there are more addicts, more dope fiends running around, going to drop dead in your yard, going to break into your home, going to murder you. And this is based on the old movie from 1936 and a long history of fear that addicted people are criminals, and they are not.
Dr. Kline, didn't you tell me it was the old drug czar that actually, what was his name? It starts with S. That actually...
Yes, Enslinger.
Yes.
Doctor, I mean, not doctor. He was a police officer. His name was Henry Anslinger, Anslinger. He was the drug czar in the United States from 1930 to 1962.
Wow.
32 years.
That's like
and nobody knows who he is, but you can find him in Wikipedia and read up all about him. And what he did was he made marijuana illegal, and he had Congress pass draconian laws, all based on the fear that these narcotics, and then they got the words mixed up, narcotic included marijuana, included cocaine, included everything, that there was a moral issue because people, like in the Reefer Madness movie, lost their morals as a result of these drugs, and it really was morally driven, never medically driven.
Dr. Kline, isn't what you're saying and asserting here also supported by the literature that does exist on long-term opiate treatments and the rates of addiction? The Fishbane study and the Cochrane review of 2010 all sort of agreed with you that even after long-term exposure, the rate of people who showed addictive behaviors or aberrant behaviors were somewhere between 1.7 and 3.9% of the population. Is that your understanding as well?
That's correct, and the numbers probably are actually lower because it's kind of hard to do this data, but it's good enough to say very low.
Very low. 98 out of 100 people. I'm sorry, you've often been quoted as saying 98 out of 100 people use all of their medications properly as prescribed and never show any sort of aberrant or misuse.
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, once a person is on opiates and they're doing okay and they're not addicted, they never will become addicted because they don't have the brain chemistry alteration that's necessary to have addiction. If the brain chemistry alteration were not there, and I mean, half the people in the United States should be out shooting up.
Well, if anybody that's ever had surgery, right, theoretically, we should all be addicted, right, if we were exposed once.
Right, and, it's important to look at things medically. We use a criminal model. We need to use a medical model. What is addiction? Is it a disease? It definitely is a disease. There's 800 papers written on the brain abnormalities in addiction. It runs in families. It starts on a very tiny dose. That's why you hear all the stories of, it just started with a prescription. That's true. But it's like the old sex education we had many years ago. We just believed if you didn't tell teenagers about sex, they wouldn't have it. That didn't work too well. So it's the same sort of thing. What kids in high schools need to know is if you've got a high school with 1,000 kids, 4 of them are going to develop a serious addiction and end up on the streets. How do we stop that? Well, what the government thinks is just tell people not to take drugs, and that doesn't work because the United States is the world's 3rd highest user of illicit drugs. We're drug takers, and we've always been that way. So you can't tell kids not to take drugs or not to have sex. You could just tell kids, okay, here's the reality of what's going on. If a person becomes addicted, it'll be when they take some opiates or even alcohol, and all of a sudden they're off on a magic carpet ride. Whereas the other kids are laughing and having a good time, but they're really not on a magic carpet ride. The description of people when they first become addicted is just hard to believe. It's almost like a religious, magical fantasy experience. Hard for us to understand because we haven't had it. But when you're 14 and you're having it, you just figure everybody's doing this, so, wow, I don't want anybody messing with my stuff. But that's only 4 kids out of 1,000 in high school. So they all need education about, hey, I think George over here is on a magic carpet ride. And you got to nail them fast because the drive is so powerful. That's what addiction is. The drive is so powerful. One addict that I spoke to was on the streets for many years, said when he was 14, he drank 3 beers. Within 2 days, he was looking for hard liquor. And from then on, he was looking for this tremendously wonderful feeling that people get. And as bizarre as that sounds, that's the disease. We have one other disease that's similar. It's called Prader-Willi, and it's in children. And they have an unbelievable seeking for food, to the point their parents have to actually put padlocks on the refrigerator. It's the same kind of weird drive.
So, could I comment on what you just said? Go ahead. Go ahead.
We have 2 callers. Do you mind if I put some people through? Because I knew. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, give me 1 second here. Caller from area code 734. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, this is Suzanne from Michigan.
Hi, Suzanne. What's your comment or question?
My question is, I've been listening and I have all my head full of all kinds of stuff right now because I just found out about everything a little while ago. But my question is how much, first of all, is there anything any of us can do to help Dr. Forrest Tennant? And is there anything that we can do so that people aren't so afraid? Because I'm a very avid advocate, and even now I'm afraid. I've got a stomachache because of this now. I'm really afraid.
Andrew, you're so kind.
Anything to say for me to tell the people that I help?
Yes, well, I know that the staff and friends of Dr. Tennant are carefully surrounding him right now as he's mentioned that he is planning his next steps. And we will be very involved with supporting him in all of those things. So check your Facebooks and anything related to the chronic pain community. And we will, as soon as the opportunity comes available, to write letters on his behalf or, help him with his defense. I have no doubt that he will be a hero to so many and that he will great support from the entire community. So, yes,
please
I'm sure there will be an opportunity.
Too. I will help
if
you need my help. Please know.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you.
Does Dr. Kline have anything to tell me to help tell people that I try to help? Because now I'm afraid. Is there anything that I can do to
tell me what are you afraid of?
I guess I'm just sick to my stomach, I guess, that
your medicine's going to be...
we're all afraid of the DEA breaking into our doctor's office or our home or something like that, when I'm afraid to even I only have a little bit of medicine, and I don't even keep it here because I'm scared. I have 2 days worth at a time because I'm afraid now. I have a big voice. I'm out there, and I'm trying not to be scared, but now I am.
Well, the people to go to in the United States, we still have a democracy here, and we still have separation of branches of government. The DEA is part of the executive branch of government. The people that control and keep them in check are the legislative branch of government. So I think letting your representatives know in your state of Michigan that you heard this story and you are scared to death that the DEA is going to come and raid your doctors. Now, they will say, oh, don't worry about that. But you have let them know that you're concerned. If somebody else calls and lets them know they're concerned, and somebody else calls and somebody else calls,
okay,
then they start to realize something's going on. So they may not take action on your...
I sat down with one of my Michigan legislators, so I can probably call him and then get other people to call. Okay.
Yes.
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 Okay. And the DEA is not going to raid you. I'm sorry. So I said the DEA is not going to raid your house. They have no standing in your home. So don't worry about being at home. Yeah. You're not the licensee.
But my doctor even said to me the other day, I don't know, he looked really sad because he knows I have allergianos and RSD systemic. I have a lot of stuff in RA, and he looked at me and he said, yeah, I know you really need it, but he said in January, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, and he's just, and then when I heard about Dr. Tennant,
and I think the basic issue that you can get across to your legislators is the government is interfering with medical practice.
Yeah.
That's it.
Which is,
period.
Yeah, they're not licensed to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Suzanne. We have another call. Caller from area code 406. What's your name and where are you from?
This is Dr. Mark Ibsen calling in. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Ibsen.
I'm calling with a question about the crime of witness tampering. Dr. Tennant was in Montana testifying for Dr. Christensen on Monday. And I understand this raid happened on Monday while Dr. Christensen was in Montana. Is this true?
That's true.
Yes.
So I'm wondering what business the DEA has interfering with Dr. Tennant's well-being on a day that he's testifying for another doctor, and the amount of stress and upset that Dr. Tennant must have been going through while on the stand, knowing that the DEA is combing through his personal effects.
We might have lost him. Are you still there?
Okay. Okay, if he comes back. But
yeah. Oh, here he is.
Oh, there he is.
Hello?
We lost you. We lost you for a minute.
We got you.
Okay.
You are correct. And what needs to happen is stories, just as you brought up, need to be brought before Congress. Congress needs to hold hearings on the DEA. And then they need to hear from doctors, lots of doctors, about what's happened to them. It's very difficult to get information, and I've been trying to get some, but it's very hard. So anybody that has any information can provide it to me on my Twitter, which is Thomas Kline, MD, and we are trying to collect cases, and hopefully Congress one day will have hearings, as they did with the IRS 20 years ago, and the IRS is a very nice organization now.
May I speak on this issue, Dr. Ibsen, because I think what you're suggesting here is that you're concerned that by the DEA being in Dr. Tennant's office while he was on the stand in another case might have affected his ability to testify effectively on behalf of Dr. Christensen. Is that your question?
That is absolutely one of them, yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to add that it is a federal crime to tamper with a witness, a victim, or an informant. Witness tampering can be committed in many ways, including harassing, intimidating, or making threats to a witness to dissuade them from providing testimony or from attending a trial or other proceeding. So I'm just going to put that out there to say I think you have a valid point.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your work on this issue, too.
Did you have any other comments?
My other comment just speaks to what crime is Dr. Tennant charged with? Who could sign a search warrant given that none of his patients have died, that no crime has been committed, and they're speculating that these doses are so high nobody could survive these doses, which of course they're flat wrong about. So
somehow everyone is alive, right?
Right. This is a fishing expedition, and and so how can the DEA pull off a fishing expedition of this scale without some collusion by someone else in the judicial branch, like a judge, saying, well, yeah, go ahead and search. We think there might have been a crime, but we can't find one, so here's all your records back. And is that going to take 2 years, which it does with every other doctor that's been raided?
Yes. Yeah, no, Dr. Tennant has not been charged with a crime.
Yeah,
Just
and
to say
warrants
that. He
generally
is
have to be
not
specific. You can't take a warrant and go to somebody's office and say, we want to see all your charts.
Well, that's what they did.
You have to specify which chart you want to watch. Yeah, this is a serious problem, you know.
Yeah, and allegedly he took payments or something like that from, was it,
from 2015.
Yeah.
Dr. Ibsen, would you say that it's true that Dr. Christensen hasn't actually been accused of a crime under a specific statute in terms of prescribing habits, or there was nothing in Montana at the time that said that this was a crime and this wasn't, right? There's no actual statute that he's been charged under.
Correct. He has not violated any particular state statute. He was accused of violating the Controlled Substance Act in that they said he was dealing drugs and not participating in a practice that's legitimate.
But not actually finding any real statute in the criminal code that they could charge him. However,
no state statute in any criminal code.
Right, but he is in a criminal trial, or his criminal trial defended and has gone to the jury, right?
That's correct. Summation has occurred. It was a brilliant summation by his attorney, and the amount of lying happening from the prosecution was stunning. Just stunning.
Well, we are certainly hoping for the best for Dr. Christensen.
Thank you. The world is full of opiate refugees right now. There is no one to treat them. And Dr. Tennant's patients are now, they were opiate refugees when they went to him at the 3rd degree. Now, people from Montana who are refugees from Montana who went to see Dr. Tennant in California are now without anyone to treat their pain. And suicides will ensue.
That's terrible. Terrible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ibsen, for calling in. We appreciate your comments and questions. Have a good one.
God bless, and God bless us, everyone.
Amen.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we have another call. Caller from area code 802. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, this is Tammy, and I'm from Vermont.
Hi, Tammy. What's your...
Hi, Tammy.
Oh, wait, is this Tammy Hale?
Hi.
Oh, hi.
This is Tammy Hale. Hi there, guys. This is... I'm glad Dr. Ibsen spoke before me. As you guys know, my husband committed suicide after being abruptly discontinued from his opioids about a year ago. And I want to make a plea to everyone listening to please reach out to your senators and your Congress. We're making a trip in the late November to speak to them personally. I'm going to do it over the phone, but they need to hear our stories. They need to hear our voices. We need to let them know what is happening. It is not okay. And if we don't reach out, it's going to keep happening. The suicide rate is just going to keep going up.
Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Tammy.
I have someone who told me they went to their legislator about this issue, and the legislator said, people aren't beating my door down about this. So there's the cue.
Really? Wow.
There's the cue. In other words, one person goes in, okay, 2 people go in, 3, 4 people go in, wow, this really is a problem.
Yeah.
So it is, it's nerve-wracking to call legislators' offices, but they're all very nice. And you can call in and just say, I'm concerned about this. And then they'll say, well, thank you. Then they keep a little tally sheet, Okay, Senator, this week we had 200 phone calls about this, a problem. And so all of a sudden, then it becomes a legislative priority. And believe it or not, legislators really are interested in solving problems. but it's better to have groups.
Yes, and may I just say from my past experience legislatively that for every one letter a legislator gets, they presume that there are at least 100 constituents who feel the same way but haven't written in. For a personal visit, they're going to assume that it's 10 times as many. So by just speaking up and walking in, you can affect a great deal of change for even the people who are unable to, physically make themselves get to a legislator's office. Those of us who can should. And I was just going to ask, you have some resources, don't you, Jonelle, that if people were really interested in some help getting to their legislators, that you have a little packet that you could forward? Mm-hmm. So I've seen that too. So
if they want to give me their information, either through social media or whatever, we will be having a packet of all of this information together that you can have. Or my email is Jonelle, JONELLE.E@conspiraciesagainstwellness.com.
So we will help.
The other thing I learned the other day from my son-in-law, who used to work for a senator, and knows the inside story, is it's okay to send emails. We always think that, we'll waste our time sending emails. That's not true. Same thing happens. They tally them up. Oh, we got 100 emails this week. That's much better than we got one email. So email is a way also to just, say, hey, what's this problem? What's going on here? I hear all this about doctors being raided. I hear all these stories about opioid refugees, people not getting any treatment anymore for their diseases. People are not getting treated in the healthcare system in the United States simply because they take opiates.
Tammy, I know Mike is there, I believe, too, and I believe you wanted to say something. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Hi, this is Mike in Vermont. And I wanted to just comment that I'm a patient who is prescribed high-dose opiates, and as with the other caller who's concerned and worried, of course, I feel the same. Now worried if this could, in fact, happen to my prescriber as well. And, of course, I would like to support in any way possible as well. And actually hope to join Tammy in talking to congressmen and senators from Vermont to voice my opinion and my concerns as well.
Good.
What you just said is what they need to hear.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. And now when you're talking about the DEA, you got to talk to your federal legislators because the DEA doesn't come under state rules. But you can still let your state people know that you're concerned your doctor's going to end up having his practice closed one day by, a bunch of black SUVs, coming in. And what happens actually is they come into the doctor's office with arms, sidearms and flak jackets, and there's always more than one. And they come at 9 o'clock in the morning when your patients are all in the waiting room. And then they come in and they go into the doctor's office and they separate the doctor and say, look, doctor, we got all this information on you. It would go a lot easier on you, doctor, if you just signed this Form 501 that we have and just voluntarily give up your narcotics license. And the poor doctors are standing there shaking and shivering, and there's all these police in his office. You got 5 armed police officers in his office. So the doctor says, well, I guess I won't end up in federal prison if I sign this, right? And the DEA agent says, oh, no problem there. You just sign this. So the doctor signs it as an innocent person and is now accidentally confirmed that he's guilty. But doctors do not know what's going on. And we're going to try to write some things for doctors so that they can understand. Very few lawyers know what goes on with the DEA. You would think they would, but they don't. Because the law that they operate from is different than arresting people and charging them. what they do is they raid places without charging people, but then they get the doctor's scalp. The doctor gives up his license, innocent or not, and then they go back to the office, and it's been reported on PBS that the agents get bonuses for surrendered licenses. A surrendered license is then goes to the state medical board. The medical board says, well, you're obviously you're guilty. You've signed this thing. So then they take away the medical license. Now the doctor can not only not prescribe narcotics, the doctor can't even see patients. Now you're in the dither because you've already said you're guilty, so there's no trial, so your life is over. And doctors don't understand. They're intimidated. This is the old backroom rubber hose thing. That caused us to have Miranda rights. Now, you see, this isn't really a criminal proceeding, so they don't have to provide Miranda rights, but they should. So one of the things we're going to be asking the Congress to ask the DEA is, why don't you put out a message to all the doctors and tell them what they're going to be arrested for, what their rights are, and what they're not going to be arrested for, and clear this up. So that's all we're asking right now. Yeah. And hopefully they will respond. The DEA, go ahead.
Oh, we have a ton
The DEA catches about 20, go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
You want me to continue or stop blithering? The DEA takes about 25 licenses a year by revocation. That means that's serious. They're yanking some crooked doctor's license. 25 a year. That's not a lot. They take 600 voluntarily surrendered licenses a year. Don't know how many of those people were really crooks or not. Who knows? But they were coerced in giving up their licenses. Now I'm done.
Okay. Caller from area code 630. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, this is Rose. I'm from the Seattle area here in Washington State. And I'm calling hi, everybody. Sorry, I got here a little bit late, so I apologize if I'm repeating stuff you already know. But in addition to this terrifying move by the DEA this week, some of the states have been acting against pain doctors at a local level and passing state legislation that has restricted legitimately seriously ill pain patients who have been stable on doses for years away from getting sufficient treatment. And it's kind of draconian. I think my state is the first to have passed state legislation defining a limit for what doctors can prescribe. They're in the process right now of passing new opioid legislation for limiting doctors of all kinds and pain physicians from prescribing certain dosages and setting all kinds of requirements for them to even do so. And the effect is that doctors won't prescribe opioids. They're just terrified because they all know some doctor who the Department of Health has come down upon and taken their license or taken their records. So it's not just the federal agencies that are acting against chronic pain patients and their physicians, but the states are as well. And it's a little overwhelming. And I think a lot of pain patients don't know what to do about that because it feels like, you're the one pain patient against the world. And I'm just wondering, some of us are trying to band together. We're trying to go to these Department of Health meetings. We're trying to make sure that the physicians and the agencies who are passing these rules see the faces of pain patients. And I'm just wondering, can you guys give us any guidance on how to be the most effective we can be at both the state and federal levels for those of us who are legitimately ill and not addicts against this seeming overwhelming force?
I don't mind taking that. Yeah, go ahead, Doctor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Head. Okay. Well,
ladies first.
You're so kind. Thank you. As Rose has just pointed out, it is crucial that we be informed. Many states are implementing individual state policies at the state board of health level. And it's very important, if you're interested or concerned about this issue, that you, number one, investigate very thoroughly what your state Department of Health opioids initiatives may be. And that information isn't always readily available. You may have to do a lot of digging, but at least 20 states have pending opioid policies on the books. 17 states have already passed laws. So if you would like to have a voice in how your state votes on this issue, you've got to be informed. The second thing you can do is use bill tracker software to plug in for your state the issue of opioids and read what current bills might be in front of the House or the Senate. And then you take action, whether you can send an email, as Dr. Kline said, if you can write a letter, if you can visit your legislators in their home offices, or if you can go to the Capitol as a group. Any and all of those things are valuable, and you must put a face on your pain. At the moment, people hear about chronic pain, and it just sounds like people who are complaining about a little arthritis. But there's a great difference between pain and intractable pain, which is a type of pain that can kill because it is a disease of its own. It has no cure. It causes blood pressure, hormone reactions, cardiac events, and must be treated. But if we don't put a face on that type of pain and suffering, we may well be swept away by the anti-opioid movement that we're all currently experiencing. So the things that you've done, Rose, sound fantastic, and I would encourage everybody to follow your lead.
Oh, thank you. I will say, as a person, I'm nearly 50. In my lifetime, I've had a number of sports injuries and surgeries and had pain treatment over the years. And then once I got diagnosed with some incurable autoimmune disorders that are just going to get progressively worse and more painful over time, all of a sudden, it's like I have a little red dot by my name. Oh, she takes prescription medication for pain. Ooh, I don't know about her. Even though, I have a clean record, I worked in high tech for 25 years. I'm a legitimate tax-paying voting citizen and all that. But now there's this stigma as if, but maybe she's really not taking those drugs, or maybe she's getting high on them. And nothing could be further than the truth. And trying to convince doctors that, nope, I'm not drug seeking, I legitimately have pain, and here's all the records that show it, it still seems like it's an uphill battle. And then you add this, what I would say is a state and federal overreach into this issue, and the doctors are just intimidated. So when they hear, that Dr. Tennant got arrested, that's just going to put this further chilling effect on all the doctors away from prescribing to legitimate patients. So in addition to the legislators, I don't know what to do to support the physicians in my community to say, we know you're practicing good medicine, we know you're doing God's work, frankly, to provide some sort of relief to people in intractable pain. How do I support my doctors?
That's
by
nice.
being compliant, by being
this is
compliant.
a time when doctors and patients need to hold hands because both are being affected. Be sure that any state legislation includes an exemption for hospice and palliative care. The federal CDC guideline, which is only a recommendation, does exclude palliative care from the guidelines. Palliative care is simply a care package like cardiac care or respiratory care. And what it is you're treating symptoms in people that have a disease without a cure.
Right.
Simple definition.
So then would people with chronic incurable conditions, would that be considered palliative care?
It would be. And all a doctor has to do is say, this person is under my palliative care program. It's not fancy. And then what I do is I write on my prescriptions, palliative care. Technically, those patients are exempt from any restrictions on the CDC guidelines. Many states are also just copying, the CDC. If the state includes that, then there is the option that you can be declared palliative care and receive treatment. Now, there are palliative care you can do in your office, doctor's offices. There's also palliative care programs. Some people say, oh, no, you have to be at your end of your life. No, that's hospice. Palliative care can be given to anyone, any age, for any disease that has no cure, which they are suffering from symptoms.
Yeah, I apologize, because that was my understanding as well, that hospice and palliative care were similar. Do you think that that's broadly understood by physicians, that palliative care can be for someone not near death?
Understood. No, it's not understood. It's a misconception. And I am working on a paper, hopefully to get published soon, to explain this to doctors, that they have an out.
Yeah.
There are 3 people on my Twitter stream out of 14,000 that have actually pulled this off. And they've gone to, you can also look up on the internet, palliative care programs, and there are various people running these palliative care programs, and you can try to sign up. But you can also just get your doctor to do it. Now, one of my patients, a doctor refused. So, you know, I'm going to see this patient and determine whether or not they have a cure for their disease and whether or not they have serious symptoms. Doctors don't realize you can actually bill insurance companies and Medicare using just symptoms. They think you have to have a diagnosis, and that's what the doctors don't understand. If you did, there are codes for pain and diarrhea and shortness of breath and vomiting. All of those are symptoms that need treatment. And palliative care is the type of treatment that you provide. You are treating symptoms and kind of saying, well, nothing much we can do about the underlying problem, so let's make you comfortable. My gosh, is this some sort of new idea, making patients comfortable? And, of course, pain is the main thing to make people comfortable. You know, you relieve their pain, and then you take care of these other things. You know, it's just a revolutionary new concept among us
that
doctors.
Was sort of my understanding of the Hippocratic Oath, in fact, was, you know, providing care in addition to not doing harm.
Well, now they have things like patient-centered care. Like, did we not have patient-centered care before? I don't know, you know. So
well, I think some areas had more billable-centered care, but sure.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, and I apologize, I apologize again if I'm repeating anything you guys have already said, but it sounds like we have this sort of multi-pronged effort of patients who are unfortunately already, you know, suffering from pain, having to get up, stand up, pick up the phone, pick up the pen, pick up a keyboard, and contact their state legislators. It sounds like some of it is contacting your federal legislators, and some of it sounds like an educational effort on the part of physicians about how to effectively treat their patients during this period of, I don't even know how to describe it, this sort of media hype, a federal overreach into the government getting in between doctors and their patients on how to practice medicine, when the relationship between patient and physician is supposed to be, what's that word, sacrosanct?
Well, let your legislators know. See, this is the kind of stuff they want to hear. I don't want the government interfering with my doctor, you know, and that's, see, what they want to hear is the problem. They kind of want to know any suggestions you have, but it's really up to them to try to figure it out. You know, here's the problem, Senator or Congressman, and we need help. Help us out. Figure out what to do.
Thank you, Rose, so much for calling in. Oh, go ahead. Oh, okay. Sorry. Caller from area code 757. What's your name and where are you from? Sorry about that. Hi, caller from 757. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, this is Tammy. I'm from California.
Hi, Tammy. I have a question.
I apologize. I do suffer from intractable pain, and I have almost like seizure episodes from neurological damage. So when I'm starting to have this pain, I have trouble communicating. So excuse me for just a second. I wanted to just ask or make a point about two things. One was about the blanket treatment that the government or the CDC is trying to impose upon people. And with people that have like the cytochrome P450 deficiencies, how no one metabolizes things the same way. And I don't hear them talking about that a lot and how that tremendously can affect the medication, the ratios of medication, how your body does metabolize it. Okay. And I wanted to know what Dr. Kline...
Yeah, they have not brought that up. Only 80% of people are treatable below their cutoff. 20% are not, and they are in the group you were in with these enzymes. And this is an example of the government interfering with the practice of medicine by trying to use one number. If the government wants to use one number, then the average height of a woman in the United States is 5'6". So we should just make all the clothing in the United States for women 5'6". The military can make all the uniforms for people 5'6". All the designers can make all their clothes for people 5'6". That's what happens when you try to apply an average to a whole population. And so you are suffering along with a lot of other people. And worse than that, I just found out today, reading a press release on the day the CDC guidelines were published from one of the chief CDC people, that these guidelines were only when you start an opiate. Only when you start. And that's reasonable. When you start, you got to be careful not to give too much. They never said these cutoffs applied to people already on treatment. But the wildfire broke out, fanned by opioid fanatics, opiophobics, we call them, fanatics, a small group of doctors in the United States, many of them in the state of Washington, by the way, who started this. Pain is not important. It's much too dangerous. You'll become addicted and die. So let's just stop using pain medicine. So the whole thing got off on the wrong start, but it became an excuse that, oh, the CDC says this. Well, first of all, the CDC has no authority to change any prescription medication and make any recommendations about upping the dose, downing the dose, taking drugs. Only the FDA can do that. The group of doctors that wanted these, that got the changes through the CDC, took the same changes and presented them to the FDA, the proper agency, 3 years before the regulations came out, and the FDA said these are not scientific, and we are denying all of them. So all of the things that you hear that the state legislatures are picking up on were already found to be unscientific by the FDA. Anybody wants to Google that, just Google 2012-P as in Paul, -0818, and you can read the letter the FDA sent to the doctor group telling them that all of the things they presented were unscientific. And all of those things ended up in the CDC guidelines.
Thank you, Tammy, so much for calling in. And we have one more caller, area code 630. What's your name and where are you from?
Hi, this is Sally Balsamo. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. And I just wanted to offer a resource, if I could, to you and your listeners. I'm with a group called the Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain, ATIP. And we're a grassroots organization that includes researchers, physicians, pain patients, their allies. And our focus is really on ensuring that we can help to maintain the best quality of life for people who are living with chronic pain conditions. I have trigeminal neuralgia, which I've had for 10 years, and I also have adult onset Still's disease, which is a form of rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm with the organization, but I'm also a pain patient. We are new. We've had a very strong response to some of our calls to action. So we are moving as quickly as we can to get information and resources out to our members. They can visit a Facebook page, and again, it's called the Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain. We have a Facebook page with a couple of articles and calls to action. There will be a lot more information added within the next couple of days. And you can contact us via that Facebook page and request additional information. And we have some information packets that we can send out to you that you can use for contacting the media in your area or the legislators in your area. And I would just have to say from my personal experience, I found it much, much easier to contact my state legislators than to contact my federal legislators. And as Dr. Kline said, they've all been really super nice, and many of them are actually grateful to have people from the community come to them and say, hey, this is an issue within your constituency. We need your help. So, again, Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain, go to Facebook and just continue to watch that space. And thank you very much, all of you, for helping to communicate this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Appreciate that. So I wanted to ask you guys something. So, like, people in high levels of pain, I mean, what basically is happening now if their meds are taken away? What's going to happen to somebody?
Well, I don't know. We know that 24 documented cases of suicide have occurred simply because they were cut off from their medications. These are people that do not have mental illness. They have chosen, planned, talked it over with their family, and found the final solution. I don't think many doctors understand what it's like to be in this much pain, but I think everyone can remember a time when they were in awful pain and how it felt to get relieved with a pain medicine pill. And imagine that happening again, only this time they deny you the medication.
Yes.
We need to put this more on a human basis, for God's sake. You know, I mean, we're having meetings about pain, books about pain, congressional hearings about pain. This is insane.
Can I contribute a little bit to this conversation on the complications of intractable pain? Dr. Tennant wrote a wonderful handbook called the Intractable Pain Patients Handbook. And many, many pain patients have a handbook for survival, in 2007. And in it, he lists the complications of intractable pain. Totally untreated intractable pain, according to Dr. Tennant, will cause death within days to weeks once it starts because of something called the cardiac adrenal pain syndrome. Severe, constant intractable pain causes the hypothalamus to overactivate the adrenal glands, which produces a lot of adrenaline and cortisol and related chemicals. This causes the pulse rate and the blood pressure to rise. And patients can end up with a high pulse rate, otherwise known as tachycardia, hormone deficiencies, heart attack, stroke, depression, hypertension, diabetes, insomnia, immune impairment, inability to eat. Uncontrolled intractable pain will drive your pulse up over 100 beats per minute and your blood pressure, over 130, over 90 and higher. This is, Dr. Tennant equivalents that to like rusting pipes. To allow yourself to be in intractable pain for a great number of days is going to do damage to your body. So it's not like it's a matter of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, bite down on a bullet and you'll be fine. If that were true, most patients wouldn't put themselves through the hoops that they have to jump through in order to obtain pain relief. But it's actually unbearably and unlikely to be survived unless it's properly treated.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's just basically inhumane. There's nobody else in the world doing this. It's against United Nations regulations. And last time I checked with Org in his cave 5,000 years ago, they were treating pain with opium plant extracts.
The United Nations actually has a statement on the undertreatment of pain, where they have said that it's time to demand that all pain patients be treated. And they actually said that, let me give you the exact quote, the poor availability of pain is both perplexing and inexcusable, and that, yes, it's akin to torture. I mean, there's a reason that pain is used in torture, because it breaks people down.
I'm so sorry.
Yes,
we put a caller through by accident, and I don't think they know they're on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize. I didn't mean to do that.
Well, let them talk then. Sounds like they know what they're doing. Go ahead.
Hi, you're in on queue on area code 909. What's your name? Where are you from? I apologize. I didn't realize we're in.
Hi, my name is Kathy Keene.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hi,
Kathy.
Can you hear me? Hi. Yeah. I'm I advocate online all the time and Twitter, and I love you, Dr. Kline. Hello.
Oh gosh. Thank you.
Anyways, no, you're amazing, and I appreciate you standing up for all of us, even though it could cost you your practice, you know. And Dr. Tennant, what happened to him today is beyond criminal. Anyways, I'm wondering, because I'm coming in late on this, because I just wrote, I sent something publicly on Facebook to Congress, to, my senator, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, what do you think would be the most effective steps next to try to, I know we're just spinning our wheels, I feel like, and until we really get in front of, the media, I don't think that, I don't know, I don't think we're really being heard.
No, we aren't, and we have to realize there's a wildfire burning. And it's burning because of fear of dope fiends. That's what the fear really is. And so people don't want to listen because they don't want dope fiends moving in next door and killing them. So the way to do it is our legislature. That's how we Americans get things done eventually. And so I'm thinking more and more, I would advise people, just get on the email. Go to all your legislators' sites, the state and federal, and let them know that you're concerned about this horrible issue of the DEA and pain and not being treated and opioid refugees. And you don't have to be specific. You just say, I'm hearing all this stuff. What's going on? What can we do about this? I've suggested that people picket. In Poland, they wanted to outlaw abortion, and so all the women got out in the street, and the next day they backed off. It's important to try to become public as well, but if you had to do one thing, it'd get on the email.
Thank you for calling in with your questions. So what are we going to, does it matter who we hold accountable for this? How are we going to start changing this? How far is this going to go? Does anybody know anything in sight of what's going to happen? And are doctors going to be able to stop being so afraid and things can turn back to letting doctors treat patients like they should be? Do you guys see that happening?
Well, we need to, it's hard because it's out of control. The DEA has to be called off, and go ahead.
Well, let me just offer one solution that was based on a conversation with a senior healthcare official, legislator that I spoke with. There are 8 states right now in the United States that have protection laws for intractable pain patients. And it seems that in those states, Texas is one that I know for sure, the doctors there feel a little bit more comfortable because there is a statute that protects them from their treatment of intractable pain. And our legislators have suggested that it would be, the best thing for this to be a state law in every state. Because what's happening is we're sacrificing one patient population on the altar of the other. Of course, people with the illness of addiction, need resources and help, and nobody wants to take that from them. But we don't want to sacrifice people whose innocent lives have been affected by horrific, incurable pain at the same time. So he suggested maybe getting a copy of the state's intractable pain patient laws and using those to go to your legislators and say, other states are doing this. This is what I think I would like to ask you to provide this protection for us as well. I realize that the DEA has jurisdiction over that, so it's not a complete solution. But in the states where intractable pain patient laws are in place, it does seem that people are getting a little bit better access to treatment than in those where no such law exists. So it would be easy enough to find a copy of the Texas Intractable Pain Patients Law online and to bring that to your local policymaker and say, can you do this for me? It is amazing, but one person alone can make a change if you can go in and make an effective case for it. So I would encourage everyone to at least give that a try.
That's a great idea. And for those fighting proposed legislation, you can also, if you're losing the battle, you can say, okay, please include this in the new law.
And also ask for legacy. Right, and let's ask for some legacy exceptions for patients who are already in care, which is obviously not fair to those that will develop intractable pain laws, conditions. But if we can protect one half of the population, we can then continue to work for better treatment for those coming behind us.
All right, well, believe it or not, these hearings that we've been hearing about in Colorado and in Washington to try to make these terrible laws, people speaking up are making a difference. They really are.
They are. They definitely are.
People are realizing that first of all, they're fooling around with medicine. They're practicing medicine. They're starting to get nervous. And so the more people in there, pointing this out to them, hey, you're interfering with my doctor, unless you know what you're doing, I suggest you not do that. Doctors don't make laws and criticize legislators, and the reverse is true.
Yes, I was a part of the Colorado webinar and each state holds these meetings differently, but after they presented the new changes that were extremely rigorous and much further than even the CDC guidelines, in Colorado, they were asking for a 50 morphine equivalent ceiling, not even debating the issue of morphine equivalent formulas, which we know don't work, but they were capping it at 50, 7 days for acute pain, and 90 days for chronic pain, unless you could prove 30% more function at each visit. So that went way further than the CDC guidelines did. And for the next hour and a half, we had representatives from every physicians organization, pain organizations, patients stood up one after another and just tore those proposed changes to bits. And I know that the people who worked on those were probably quite upset. They thought they were bringing what the people wanted, but it was a powerful showing of solidarity against these new policies. So it does matter if you find these meetings, and it does matter if you speak up. And it does matter that you make your voice heard, because essentially they work for us, right? So we need to be heard, just like Tammy mentioned in the beginning.
Do they have to see us? Is there so who can we go into if we wanted to go in personally? And do you have to have an appointment? And do they have to see you or not?
In this process, usually it depends on who you're going for. If you have state legislators, it would be most courteous to call first. You will always be speaking to a staffer first, where you'll explain what your condition is and what you're calling about. Ask to make an appointment to come in. And then when that appointment is set, come in, be prepared, be polite. Don't be afraid to cry if you need to, but let them, show them maybe the Texas law that I showed you or that I mentioned, or the packet that our earlier caller suggested they could get, and present your case and keep presenting it until you feel like you've made your points. I have found them to be very, very receptive. I feel that most legislators are just like us. They're not endowed with special knowledge, and they believe what they've heard in the press to be true, that there's an epidemic. And we all know that those statistics are not valid, not based on good quality evidence. The guidelines were not tested, and there's a lot of poor evidence for their guidelines. So most legislators don't know that. Don't assume that they know anything. Go in and explain to them from the beginning that this happened, and now you're without treatment. Nobody wants to see anybody suffer, and the face of suffering, when it's right there in the office, is very powerful.
Also, it's good to go with a little group if you can, rather than going alone. They like little groups, and even if it's just your mother, you know, a group is powerful. The other thing you can do is you can just call the office and leave a message, like emailing. You know, just leave some messages. But formal visits do work, but you kind of, like Andrea says, you have to plan a little bit and get a couple people in there, maybe have some statistics or documents or stories of other people. That goes a long way, too.
Jesse Lynn from YouTube Live asks, how do we get local media to cover the other side of the opioid crisis when forwarding articles and coverage does not work?
If I could mention that George Knapp, if you could search for him, George, Knapp, in Las Vegas, did what I believe is the first week-long series on the opioid refugees, as Dr. Kline has coined for us. So George Knapp, Las Vegas Live Opioid Series, was a fantastic series of coverage that included virtually everything we've discussed tonight, many pain stories, and I would suggest forwarding those to your local media stations. This is what they're doing in Las Vegas. This coverage was incredibly successful. Go ahead and watch. Each one is 4 to 5 minutes long. They're not long segments, but they're powerful and effective. And I believe that once other media outlets see that the story is changing, and I do think it is, I think people are tired of the opioid epidemic, and we bring a new side to this conversation. And so forwarding those videos to media, I think might be the most effective way right now to get picked up, and then offer that you have a personal story that you'd be willing to be on camera or interviewed. If you have other people that you know, include them in that group, like Dr. Kline just mentioned. It helps if you give them a story. So use George Knapp's series and give them a story.
Kelly Thornton.
I agree. Go ahead.
She just, because I know, Dr. Kline, you can answer this. Kelly Thornton asked, how does one tell their story in letters and, you know, when people are asking about that? And I know you had some great information on that.
It's better if the stories are put together. Like we put together 24 stories of people who committed suicide, which is also on my Twitter stream for anybody who wishes to read them. But we want to gather stories, so you can either send them to me or Andrea or Janelle, because we want to put them together in a compendium. Single stories aren't as powerful, but 20 stories is very powerful, because then people go, oh, this is really true. You know, this is what's really going on. So if you have a little story, just do a couple of paragraphs, and you can find me on Twitter at Thomas Kline, MD, or Janelle has just given you her information. So get hold of us, and then we will tell your story for you. You can always try for a newspaper, but again, it's good to have a group of people. You know, if you got 5 or 6 people, that's much, much better.
And one other thing that seems to be very effective is writing back in the comments of articles that you've read, whether to rebut and provide alternative information, or to say, that was an excellent article, I'd love to follow up. Can I call you and tell you my story? Or can I send it to you in a quick email? Journalists are always looking for new material, new stories, something they can write about. So following up in the comments section, either positively or negatively, can also open doors for you to tell your story. So don't forget to comment articulately and well, and you might find some doors opening that way.
D. Moore asks, how can we contact Dr. Tennant and let him know we are supporting him?
I would suggest at this moment calling his office number, or I honestly, I don't know that I should speak for that. He has a website, forresttennant.com, DTENNANT, and you might be able to reach him there, or just stay in touch with Janelle's website or her Twitter feed, and as soon as we have a place for us to send information, Dr. Tennant, we will make that available.
I wanted to give each one of you guys, the last say. Dr. Kline, would you please, let everybody know, something that we've missed, or just like closing statements for tonight? Because we've covered so much stuff, and I wanted to thank both of you for coming on, by the way. But what would you like everybody to know before we get going here?
There is no opioid epidemic. There is no opioid crisis. It's all an exaggeration of the facts. The facts are there in the CDC stuff to look at. For example, the increase in deaths is 1 person per 100,000. That's not an epidemic. That doctors are not responsible for this. I mean, I would do a mea culpa if I thought I was, but I'm not, nor is anyone else. Most all the drugs on the streets get there illegally, not from doctors. And everybody needs to speak up. We need to have a mass demonstration by email and phone calls to legislators, not worrying about them saying, oh, I'm going to do something. They just need to know. A lot of people are concerned about the interference of the practice of medicine and the effect that it's going to have on you as a patient now and in the future. They're not even giving out pain medicines in emergency rooms or after surgery. This thing has gone off the cliff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Have you ever seen anything like this, Dr. Kline?
No, in my 40 years of practice, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. There have been 5 drug wars, starting with Dwight Eisenhower and moving up through the ranks, 5 of them. But nobody's ever really been harmed. This time, people are being harmed for the first time because of the CDC suggestions, they're not regulations, and the fact that it unleashed a prejudice against people who take opiates believing they're all dope fiends. There are 10 chronic pain patients for every 1 addict. It's 10 to 1. But the Salem witch trials ended when a pastor wrote in and said, are we going to continue to hang 10 people to find 1 witch? And that's what's happening.
Well, I'd like to just my closing statement. Of course, there's so many things I'd like to say in agreement with Dr. Kline. The opioid epidemic is really an epidemic of illicit fentanyl and its analogs, which are easily obtained through the dark web, manufactured in China and shipped over here. The epidemic of carfentanil alone is so great because it takes such a small amount of that substance to cause an overdose. It's actually an elephant tranquilizer that's being used now to cut heroin. And I think in the most recent studies, even by the CDC, up to 90% of people from overdose deaths had a form of fentanyl or its analogs with or without heroin or alcohol. So most of the overdose deaths that we're seeing are either from these very dangerous street drugs or through what they call polysubstance deaths. But I would like to just on a personal note, when I speak with my legislators and my physicians, I make the point that Tammy Hale has made before as well when she talks about her husband, Doug, who did choose the final solution, that by removing a patient from their medications, they give us only 3 choices: to suffer and to die from the side effects of pain itself, to be forced into using those same street drugs that this whole movement was supposed to prevent, and then likely becoming a victim of an overdose because those medications are not safe and not regulated, so we have no way of knowing what's in them. So the very actions taken to prevent overdoses may in fact cause them. Or the third, which is to end your own life. So which would be a greater epidemic than any overdose epidemic that we might be seeing? So as I mentioned before, it's just improper to serve one patient population by sacrificing the other. And why can't we treat both with appropriate treatments given their individual needs? And I've never had a legislator argue at that point with me.
Nicely put.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you both for coming on. This was short notice. You know, I didn't expect, you know, to be able to whip this up this quickly, but you guys were both awesome, and we had a ton of comments on YouTube. So I'm seeing, you know, everybody was very happy, and they thought the information was great. I really appreciate it, and again, just thank you both for coming on and you know, spending the time and sharing the knowledge and telling us about Dr. Tennant.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome, but you have not received my bill yet.
You're right. What is it, a quarter?
Janelle, what is your YouTube channel for those of us who would like to meet with your...
Yeah, it's Conspiracies Against Wellness live stream. I put it on all my social media accounts. I have it on there too as well, so you could see it. But you could get to it also through the website, or you could just go to YouTube, either way.
Okay, well, we'll definitely go check that out. Thank you for sponsoring this and for caring about the plight of, I don't know, Dr. Kline, do we know how many patients are treated with opioid medications right now?
We have a pretty good number. 9 million in the U.S. require opiate treatment out of 25 million that have serious pain. So about a third need pain medicine around the clock. And according to 2 independent surveys, 2/3 of those, that's about 6 million, are looking for doctors because they've been cut off.
Well, let's say thank you then to the doctors that are...
Yep.
Yeah, let's just take a minute to say thank you to every physician out there that continues to be brave in the face of this and treat the patients who are suffering. We appreciate you very, very much.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kline.
A ton of people saying that you get paid in donuts.
Yes, jelly donuts. Jelly donuts, I think. Jelly donuts,
Do you know what the DEA is? It's the Donut Enforcement Agency, and I am scared to death.
We're all going to go have a donut on your behalf, Dr. Kline.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much, and I appreciate coming on again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Con Nation, I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. This is so important. You know, I think a lot of us, I know Dr. Tennant, this happened the other day, but I found out myself. So as soon as I found out, I was in shock. And I started sharing it and everything like that. And then we kind of just threw this show together around 5 o'clock this evening. So apologize, it's not like the normal prep that I normally do. And I wanted everybody that commented, called in with questions, thank you so much for doing that. If you have any comments or questions that I didn't answer or get to on the feed, please feel free to go ahead on social media and just contact me. I can get it to whoever you have the question for. And I just want to say, again, I hope you all have a good night. Don't be afraid. But one thing we need to do is get together, come together, unite on this. This has to be a movement. It is the modern day civil rights movement, basically. And that's what's going on right now. Just like Dr. Kline said, he's never seen anything like this in his 40 years of practicing. I've spoken to a lot of people, and they say the same. So unless if we stand up, things will not change, and we're going to just all get steamrolled, and that's it. So we need to do this. All righty, everyone. I hope you have a great night. And again, thank you from Kline Nation.
Listening to Conspiracies Against Wellness with Janelle Elgaway. Join us next week to get in on the conversation. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and callers, and not necessarily those of EXG, LLC, its employees, or sponsors. I'm David Schiff.
The Cause Show with Janelle Elgaway is copyright 2017 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.